In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Grizzlies beat writer Drew Hill, joined, as always, by columnist Chris Herrington. Still have quite a bit going on in Grizzlies world. Second time this week. We have come on here to talk. Last time was Monday. Monday night turned out to be a pretty eventful night. So we have more to talk about on the Ja Morant front, and definitely more to talk about from a team standpoint for a basketball team that is struggling right now. But Chris, as you just assess the current state of the Memphis Grizzlies, what comes to mind first?
Well, one of the things I wrote on Monday night after the Monday night game in that column about Ja's return from suspension is that all of sort of the Ja Morant related dramas of the preceding days, his play in the second half against the Lakers, his comments after the game in the locker room directed at the coaching staff, the suspension, the return from the suspension, that like 4 days of drama around Morant. One of the things I wrote Monday night was that it actually obscured what were probably some very legitimate frustrations underneath it all. And that now that you've pushed past that to some degree, the continued struggles sort of highlight some of those frustrations. That this is not, there's an issue of like Ja Morant's happiness, at the center of things, as it often is with the Grizzlies. But there's a lot more there too in terms of the team's struggles. It's a bigger question than Ja Morant. It's even a bigger question than the Ja Morant Thomas Isolo relationship. But that's certainly part of it.
And even, I believe, a bigger question than Isolo himself. Like, we could just talk about the current state of the roster. Just, the injuries have obviously hurt the team quite a bit, but their inability to make shots is really messing up a lot of things right now, it feels like.
You wonder how different things would look if, in particular, Jalen Wells and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope were making open shots. They have a record, a smaller record in Jalen Wells' case, but a record as being good shooters. They both look good in the preseason, and the regular season started, and they're missing a lot of just open shots. And what is more inherent is that they're not great. They're subpar athletes by the standards of NBA wings. But you hope to make up for that with defense and shot making, and the shot making's not there. And in the absence of that shot making, the lack of athleticism is just all that more stark. And I think, you can throw Jock Landale in, who is making shots, but also not a great athlete by the standard of NBA starting centers. And to me, the lack of athleticism and dynamism around Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson, it's just been a real drag. They get off to bad starts basically every game.
That, and also not necessarily Jock, on the Jock point. From three, he's making shots.
He's 3 from me, he's making shots.
And around the rim, it's a little clunky at times. Not that he doesn't make any shots around the rim, but it just feels like he should be making more.
And this, to me, is really sapped. And maybe we're sort of jumping too ahead. The Ja Morant stuff is interesting in terms of his game. There's the mood is one thing, the game is the other. He is missing shots himself. He's missing threes. He's not getting to the rim. It's unclear how much of that is environmental, how much of that is mood, how much of that is just abilities. His abilities have changed. But I've maintained like all along, like this guy's still an elite passer, playmaker, vision, creativity. And like, I mean, that game against Detroit, I think he had 10 assists. He should have had like 18. Like if guys could just catch passes and finish plays at the rim and guys could make open shots. And the inability of other players on the court to make shots and to finish plays that he sets up really takes away. It's hard to weaponize his passing and creativity when there's not people on the other end of the passes who can make plays.
Yeah, no, I think that's becoming one of the big storylines here early in the season. Okay, let's separate Ja's Friday from his Monday. Monday painted the picture of a player who was clearly still not happy, who it was a much better basketball effort put forth. He played better in that game than he did against the Lakers. But it wasn't the Ja everybody's used to seeing. You know, there was no celebrations. Like, the one play was the alley-oop, where usually, you know, you're getting some sort of flair to that.
Right.
Nothing. Just dunks it, you know, and walks off the court after
There's no,
the
he's not turning and roaring to the fans. He's not doing any of that.
And so it painted the picture of a player who still definitely just didn't look happy. And then you get into the post game, and
I likened it to Friday night. It felt like a guy quitting on the game, and Monday night it felt like a guy suffering through the game. Like, it's just a thing he had to get through, and he was going through it, but his heart wasn't fully in it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, then you get to the post game, and the post game was obviously a little standoffish, and like, Isolo talked about it before the game and got asked a lot of the same questions, but Isolo's answers and Ja's answers are different answers, right? They are, you know, in every equation, in every, whatever the situation is, there's two sides to the story. And Isolo went in with whatever he had prepared that he was going to say, which was not much.
Right.
And decided to say not much about it, but said the bare minimum of, you know, we're moving on. We're focusing on basketball. We're moving on. And, you know, with Ja, who's, you know, had to have known he was going to get the same question, you know, sort of pointed back to Isolo's answers and said, you know, he's already said it. You know, why are you asking me? He's already said it. But, you know, Ja's his own person. So, I don't know even really what to make of it. It just again felt like a player that was still unhappy in that moment.
I mean, and this is sort of what I focused on more so writing, and it's what I focused on in my questions, for better or worse. To me, the play or lack thereof, the lack of effort in the second half against the Lakers, to me, that's the most important thing that's happened in a Grizzlies game this season. I care about that more than I care about how he responds to questions. I care about that more than I care about, you know, him lashing out at the coaching staff. I actually don't care about that all that much. And I care about that way more than, like, you know, him shooting back at me when I ask him a question that he thinks is a bad question.
Well, the reality of this is like, and I think there's a lot of people that are guilty of this, and this happens quite a bit, is that the basketball stuff of it is way more important than the media stuff of it. And that's just the truth. And, like, there's lots of players that don't love talking to the media. Like, Luka doesn't like talking to the media. And it doesn't matter, because the basketball, when he's awesome on the basketball
I don't think I would love
court,
talking to the media.
No, I don't. Yeah.
To be honest.
Here's the thing about this too, is like, I don't think people realize that, like, maybe I'm speaking for you here, like, no one wants to ask the basic questions there. Like, no one wants to have to do that. Like, I am a pretty non-confrontational human being in general. Right. And I think if you follow our work, particularly at the Daily Memphian, we spend so much time humanizing these players. Like, and I spend so much time focusing on that aspect of covering a basketball team. Whether that be when I traveled to Ja's hometown several years ago and did the series on his upbringing and writing about him gifting shoes to kids. And, you know, I wrote about the time he tipped South Main Sushi $1,000 the other week and, like, did a whole thing on his summer. But, like, I understand why it's hard to have to answer, you know, those questions. We also have a job we have to do, right? At some point, when news happens, you ask the people involved in the news about the news. That's kind of the thing. But at the same, so like, I'm not judgmental or, like, mad. Like, it does not matter. I don't care if Ja is going to be standoffish. It really, I don't care. That's his right, you know? Do I think that a lot of fans wish that the answer was different than what it was on Monday? Probably. I think most people were kind of hoping that he would just say, you know what? We're moving on from this situation, and I'm worried about basketball.
Here's the thing, though. This is sort of my point. he lashed out at the coaches on Friday night, and that created issues that there were repercussions from. It was not a positive thing. He was standoffish on Monday night. He said the right things last night. No, that arc really hasn't changed the basketball any, and that's
right.
kind of what matters.
And
his mood is relevant to the basketball, and so
maybe to some degree.
To some degree, it is to some degree, and the question of to what degree is I think an important question for the franchise. Like not only what is Ja doing on the floor, what is he capable of doing on the floor? That's sort of a bigger question. But I think now that we've gotten through that little drama, to me, it refocuses like this is not working on the basketball floor, and how to what degree is that fixable, and how in what ways is that fixable, and that's sort of now going to become the bigger question.
Right. I'm totally with you. The basketball part of this is so much more important than the media part of this, and the basketball part of this is finding ways that Ja and Tomas can be on the same page. Ja and the organization can be on the same page. And also, this is not news. This is not news because we've been talking about it since the summer about what an important season this was for discovering how you feel about the future of the Memphis Grizzlies with Ja and Jaren at the top of it talent-wise. Are those two players that you can build around to build a championship contending team? And that's what the process of this seems to have been about from the start, right? And it's something Zach Kleiman talked about, trying to find the higher end outcomes. And this to me does not, maybe it has some small, whatever tiff may have happened on Friday night. It doesn't, maybe it has some small impact in how you feel about that future. The reality is that it doesn't just change that future overnight. And so the basketball part of this just still remains way more important than any of this other stuff that's going on. And, Ja's season in general, the numbers have not been at peak Ja numbers. There's so many factors contributing to that, and it's not entirely on him. But I just feel like that's what we need to be focusing on now, that this seems to be getting closer to business as usual.
I mean, I think one of the problems, one of the frustrations is if this season is about judging, because the stated intent after the Bain trade was we're reshaping the team around John Morant and Jaren Jackson. And I think we've acknowledged, I've written about this repeatedly, it's not crystal clear that is the ultimate direction. And they need to decide, is that actually the ultimate direction or is it not? And we're only, I guess, 9 games in. Is that 8 games? Whatever it is right now. They're 3-6, so 9 games in. Those 9 games have not been a good sample from which to judge the viability of reshaping around Ja and Jaren. Because they're both playing poorly, but they're playing poorly within a structure that has not been conducive to them playing well. In terms of the talent around them, in terms of how that talent's performing, in terms of I think Islo is struggling, it seems he is struggling to both get buy-in and to put what he sees in his head onto the basketball court. And it may be valid to conclude you're not going to be able to, even if everything was working right around them, you're not going to be able to reshape a contending team around John Morant and Jaren Jackson. That time has passed. That might be a valid conclusion. But it's hard to reach that conclusion with what's happening around them because to me, it hasn't been able to be put to a good test yet. And that could change. That could change with Zach Edey coming back. That could change with the starting lineup change. That could change with Islo growing into the job over time. It's all possible for that to change, and there's time to still evaluate that. But I think if this season is about evaluating that course, these first 9 games is just not a good reliable, portrait of what's possible.
Yeah. And again, for so many different reasons.
Right.
That seems to be what's alarming, I guess. There's so many factors. There's the injury factor. There's, right now, certainly questions about Islo. There's questions, surrounding the star players on the team. There's just so much. It seems to just be piling up so quickly in the season that trying to get to the ultimate positive outcome becomes more difficult. And I think you're seeing that in some of the just reaction to what's going on. And yeah, it has not been a pretty start to the season. Started out perfectly fine, and Ja seemed to be in a really good place when he hit that game winner against Phoenix.
It is really wild to think back, and you don't have to think about it very long, just a few days.
Yeah.
Halftime Friday night, the Grizzlies are 3-2. They have a 14-point lead at home in a nationally broadcast game against the Lakers.
Yeah.
And everything, and no one thought the Grizzlies were in great shape then. The three teams they'd beaten were bad, but it was fine. Everyone knew that it was going to take the team time to come together because of the injuries and everything else. 3-2 was a more than acceptable start, and here you're up double digits, and then everything, maybe things were fragile, and it just, whatever reason, it was prone to cracking up, but it cracked up.
We got to talk more about some of the other stuff, Isolo, Jaren, all that sort of thing. But first, let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Let's start with Isolo because the rotations have been in question quite a bit. And there have been moments, I'm watching the game, I'm thinking back to, the game against Detroit where Jaren comes out and he's playing really well in the second half and pulled off the court. I think everything Isolo says out loud logically makes great sense.
Right.
I wonder if there's also, he's been a basketball coach longer than any of us, but I do wonder about the feel of the game. If he's talked about the short-term, medium-term, long-term plan, and that's part of the reason why they're doing things the way that they're doing them. And I understand that. It makes sense. But then when you watch a game and you're trying to win a basketball game, I think you have to be adaptable to that.
Well, here's what I'm going to push back, though, because I actually think...
I'm glad we're getting some pushback. It gives a couple of different opinions.
Yeah, I think this is actually the one thing, and it may be the only thing to this point. It's actually the one thing that I think has been underrated about Isolo is adaptability over the course of a game. The starting lineup's not working. The general sort of structures and system is not clicking. The rotation pattern that he is sort of pre-subscribes to start a game with, I do think is creating problems with some of the quick subs. The Grizzlies have consistently been this season a much better second half team than first half team. And one of the reasons I think that happens is that I think in the second half of games, he starts deviating from the initial plan and makes changes based on feel. And, we saw it when Javon Small got pulled in the middle of that game at Phoenix. When, Javon Small's spot in the rotation, he changed it on the fly and went more Cam Spencer. I think we've seen him adjusting minutes up. Hasn't changed starting lineup, but adjusting minutes up on Cedric Howard in response to what's happening in games. I think we saw it the game at Toronto. They ended up not winning, but they got back in it in part because he leaned into Omax Prosper. He leaned into athleticism. Omax Prosper and Vince Williams. He deviated from the first half rotation and adjusted to get more athletes on the floor, and they played better. And we saw it last night when he leaned into Cam Spencer and he leaned into Vince Williams away from Jalen Wells and away from KCP. I think when he loosens up and trusts his instincts to adjust to the game in front of him, the team has gotten better in the second half of games. But I think it's the initial lineups. It's the initial rotation plan. It's just their system is not clicking in part because of some of that initial stuff. One last point. I think the biggest thing with him is not a small thing. It's a big thing. And the big thing is, do you get buy-in? Whatever you want to do as a coach, it starts with, do you have the buy-in? And it's not clear he has the buy-in.
That is certainly true. I wanted to ask you this, though, I don't disagree with anything that you just said. it is true that he has done all those things. That's a totality of the roster picture, though. And there's a difference, I think, between a totality of the roster picture and he pulled Javon Small and put in Cam Spencer versus, oh, wait, Jaren's playing super well in this moment. He just got it going, and now you're out. Like that, those are different things, in my opinion. Like the way that you manage Ja and Jaren is different than you manage the rest of the roster.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem with sticking to a pre-subscribed thing.
Right.
I'm saying when he is deviated, he's generally deviated in positive ways. It's the initial thing that the initial stuff in terms of lineups and the rotation patterns that's caused problems, it seems to me.
So, and then there's questions about finding Jaren's effectiveness.
Yep.
And
he said last night, this is something we need to put emphasis on. And like, it's time to put that in practice.
The one thing I like, one of the, I think, public frustrations, not necessarily from the team, but that you see online, and there's a lot of those right now, is like Ja and Jaren don't play very many minutes together, which I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because as we were just talking about, all the guys struggling to score offensively.
This is a math problem that a lot of fans aren't recognizing.
Like, you almost have to have one of those two guys on the court at all times, so you have to stagger them, in my opinion, because you don't have enough
It's a damned
dudes.
if you do, damned if you don't. If you stagger them to make sure you have, because of the Ty Jerome, Scottie Pippen both being out, you only have one real on-ball creator, that's Ja Morant. He can't play 48 minutes. And so if you want to like have more effective lineups with Ja's off the floor, you keep Jaren in, right? So you have one of your primary creators. Well, if you do that, you're going to minimize the amount of minutes they play together. People are going to be mad that they're not playing more minutes together. Well, if you play them more minutes together, that means you're going to play more minutes without either of them on the floor. And then you're looking up and it's like, it's the Cam Spencer, Vince Williams backcourt with like no go-to scorer. And now you're struggling with that. So I think he's in a tough spot as far as that goes.
That is obviously a challenge. But then there's just Jaren in general, who is the types of shots he's getting are the same types of shots he was taking before. As Isla mentioned, when I asked him about Jaren not getting the ball enough, the true shooting percentage is good, and that's fine. But I think the volume needs to come up for sure, especially with an offense that's struggling. And given that he's one of your best players and was at a higher volume, still an efficient scorer last year. So Ja seemed to think that part of the problem is that they have no spacing because guys aren't making shots. And
that's definitely part of the problem.
Players are just packing the paint, and it makes it way more difficult on Jaren. I think another part of this is, like, it did start last year, and it was happening quite a bit in the second half of last year. But it took a while for teams to just automatically double Jaren when he gets the ball. And, like, now you don't see a possession where they try to defend him one-on-one. It's just an automatic double team. And when Jaren is one of the big areas where they wanted to see progress with him last year, and I'm sure that continues now, is like being able to pass out of those to open teammates when they're going to double you and make some shots. And guys aren't making shots. So it's just, it's created, I agree with Ja. I think that has been a big problem.
I think the team, and the coaching staff specifically, but the team broadly, needs to be a lot more intentional and aggressive about getting Jaren different kinds of touches and good spots to get going. And I think one of the things I wrote about this a little bit in the game story, I had deja vu watching the first half last night because it looked like games 3 and 4 against Oklahoma City all over again. And what happened in those games was they guarded Jaren with Alex Caruso. Oh, he's got a little guy on him. Post up Jaren. Well, that little guy is super strong, like Josh Okogie last night, just super strong and a really good post defender. And so now you're trying to post Jaren up because you think that's the way you got to get him the ball. But Jaren doesn't want to be aggressive to get post position because he's scared he's going to get an offensive foul, which he probably will. And then you got all these because the big guy's not guarding Jaren, you have all these long defenders trying to harass the entry passes, and guys aren't good at throwing entry passes anyway. And now if you don't get the timing just perfect on the entry pass, Jaren's trying to repost, and now he's even more worried about getting an offensive foul. And then you end up wasting a bunch of time and not getting him the ball. And it's like, just go away from that. Just because he has a small guy on him doesn't mean he has to be a low post guy. Like, let him be a spacer and get catch and shoot threes. Get him the ball, do Ja Morant, Jaren pick and roll like I thought they were going to do. Get him the ball like in semi-transition and let him face up from the top of the key and drive or shoot,
Yeah. Like just let him. There were times last year not bringing the ball all the way up the court, but just like bring him up to the top of the key, hand him the ball, clear the lane, let him go.
No, you
like,
still get the
that's what he's
same
been good
problem.
at.
You still get the same spacing problem. If you want to say clear out, let Jaren go one-on-one, well, you still get the same problem Jaws had.
You're still going to end up with the double
looking
team.
up and seeing three people. So there are issues there, but I don't think they have been aggressive or creative enough in terms of getting him touches. I think that would be near the top of the list of things to complain about.
Yeah, I certainly think so on that. All right, so we talked Isola, we talked rotations. What's the temperature check on Isola right now?
Well, who are you putting? Whose mouth are you putting the thermometer in? Right? Oh, you mean for Islo himself? I think a lot of fans are just out. Right? Organizationally, it's too soon. What matters most is probably the players.
Got to get the players in. You get the players in, the fans will come back.
Yeah,
in.
no, I think it's not great. I still think it's early. Longtime Grizzlies fans, like the old school Grizzlies fans, have a really bad deja vu situation with Mark Averoni. Mark Averoni was the lead assistant for the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. He'd been a former player, super smart guy. Everyone thought he was the next big coach. Lots of teams were interested in him. It was a celebrated hire. Grizzlies brought him in. When you talk to him, super nice guy, super smart guy, great guy to talk to. Everything sounded great. They did ads promoting the team that season. That's Mark Averoni, like in his office with his X's and O's and like the big brain at work, all of this, right? And then he just could not coach. Period. It was terrible. A lot of people have this feel, this is Averoni 2.0. Well, Islo has been a successful head coach. It was not in the NBA, but it was in terms of that idea of being the guy in charge, which Averoni never been. Islo has done that. There's still this question of, he sounds, and some people would disagree about this, I think they're wrong. He is super smart. And when you ask him stuff, like I've had people say, well, that's word salad, and it's not. It's not Taylor Jenkins' word salad.
There's nothing he says that's illogical. He
is extremely cogent, extremely coherent, extremely thoughtful. All that's great, but that doesn't mean you're a good NBA head coach. It's about taking that stuff and applying it to players and getting it to work on the floor and getting the buy-in. My thing is, I'm wait and see on this. Is it possible this is Averoni 2.0 and you just decide, okay, some guys don't have it and he just doesn't have it at the NBA level? That's possible. But I think it's too soon for me. It is too soon to draw that conclusion. I need more time with it, and I need him to not have his hands tied behind his back with not having a true starting center and not only having one ball handler who can do stuff. I just got to see.
No, it is
more.
It's too early because, and again, the injury situation is what it is.
Yeah,
and it was a major blow, and so we have to see more. We're forced to see more. I would just say this: there's managing basketball, and then there's managing people.
100%.
And the managing basketball aspect, I think if you just listen to the guy talk, is not going to be an issue. The managing people thing, we don't know exactly what happened. We can't pretend to know the details of it. They're not talking about it.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like business as usual for the Grizzlies right now. It just doesn't feel that way. You go into the locker room after a game and Ja's upset, or Jaren's upset, or, like Jalen Wells, who's really good talker, usually, really good with the media and gives really thoughtful answers, had nothing last night. Had nothing. And so it all comes back to the buy-in aspect, right? And we don't know what the level of buy-in is on this team. And it doesn't seem to be that it's at 100%. So it is, that to me is what it's managing basketball, and then there's managing people. And that's honestly what this comes down to.
One of the things I wrote about Ja Morant on Monday night after the Pistons game was he looked like a player who was having trouble summoning belief. Well, I think that applies to a lot of the guys. It feels that way. And you need to summon that belief in order to push through, adversity.
And maybe he will. We can't. Again, I think it's too soon to just be like, no, this experiment's over.
It is. It is for me. There are a lot of people who are saying that, and they may look up and have been correct.
Yeah,
but for me, I am not comfortable drawing that conclusion. Yeah.
So, I'm fascinated to see how things are going to go, and I'll say this too. Like, this Dallas game feels pretty important because
you know what I want to see in this game. I have not been the pound the table. You got to change the starting lineup. I think a lot of what Eastlow said about total minutes and lineup over the course of 48 is true. But they're getting off to terrible starts, and you got too many bad athletes on the floor of John Morant too often that can't weaponize his passing. I want to see. Here's what I want to see: starting lineup Friday night. Point guard John Morant, power forward Jaren Jackson Jr., scoring guard. Give it a little bit more. Jalen Wells. Small forward, Cedric Coward. And Edie's been practicing with the hustle. Let's go. Edie at center. That's what I want to see on Friday night.
What's the current situation with Bassey? Like, that was his last game?
Last night was the last game on his 10-day contract. I had a note about this in the game story. Last night was the last night on his 10-day contract. You can sign someone to a second 10-day contract, but you have to have access to that hardship exception, which is how they signed him to begin with. You have to have the roster spot, which you get from the hardship exception. If you have that roster spot, you can sign him to a second 10-day. But the only way you have the hardship exception is if 4 players out projected the next 2 weeks. So when is Zach Edey projected back? If they re-sign Charles Bassey to a second 10-day, that will tell you it will be at least 2 weeks for Zach Edey. If they do not re-sign Charles Bassey, or anyone else, and they're not going to sign anyone else. If they don't re-sign Charles Bassey before Friday night's game, that tells you Edey is expected back within the next 2 weeks. There are people who would like for them to keep Bassey regardless. I just don't see a path for them to do that right now.
Okay, last thing before we get out of here, and I was alluding to it earlier. Friday feels particularly important against Dallas for the vibes because
it's also a Rookie of the Year showdown.
It is. It is a Cooper Flag versus Cedric Coward. You got the Thunder coming in on Sunday. Vibes, as we've mentioned, not the best around the team right now. The Grizzlies will be going to New York City and Boston after this. The media thing is going to those markets are tough, right? So if the vibes are still pointed in the wrong direction, right, it sets up for what could be a testy next.
I would almost want to do a preliminary mulligan on that Thunder game. That's why that makes the Dallas game more important. If it's a 6-game losing streak with things not looking any better going into that road trip, that's kind of rough.
Yeah. No, that's going to be a tense trip. So it would be nice for the Grizzlies to get one on Friday against Dallas. Just try to improve the vibes. Try to get this thing, as I said earlier, back to business as usual, as fast as they possibly can. It just doesn't feel like that's the case quite yet. So we will see what happens. We'll be back next week talking more Grizzlies, and I will be in New York City and Boston on that trip. So it should be a very interesting few days. All right, for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.